While this podcast isn't rated explicit, the content may not be suitable for younger listeners. Welcome to Sex for Saints, the Christian couple's guide to great sex. I am your host, certified sex and marriage coach, Amanda Lauder. This is episode 300, celebrating 300 episodes. Welcome to Sex for Saints, a podcast for Christian couples. My goal with this podcast is to help enlighten, educate, and inspire you to understand yourself, your spouse, and your sexuality better. I talk about sex in a way you probably haven't heard before. I'm bold, I'm direct, but I keep everything in line with my strong Christian values. Are you ready? Let's go. Hello, everyone. Wow, we are here. Episode 300. I can't even believe it. Oh my gosh. 300 episodes, 300 weeks of content, 300 weeks of writing, 300 weeks of stretching myself, 300 weeks of connecting with you, 300 weeks of educating you, 300 weeks of hopefully helping you develop a better relationship with yourself, 300 weeks of helping you develop a better relationship with your spouse, 300 weeks of helping you develop a better relationship with your sexuality. Thank you. Thank you if you've been with me the entire time. Thank you if you're joining me for the first time. It's such a privilege to be let into your life, to be let into your very valuable time and schedule. And thank you for letting me into your earbuds. I really feel so honored. When I started this podcast almost 6 years ago, I really struggled to imagine what it would be like to even do 100 episodes, let alone 300. And I remember when I switched my niche to sex and a friend said to me, "Do you really think you could do a podcast week after week about sex? Do you even have enough material?" And I said, yes. And I really rarely struggle coming up with a topic. There is so much that I can talk about when it comes to sex, because sex is not only the act itself, which I can talk about lots of different aspects of, but also encompasses our relationship with ourselves and the intimacy that we have with ourselves. It also encompasses our relationship with our spouse and overcoming obstacles and really building intimacy between the two of you. And then, really building a better relationship with your sexuality. So there have been 300 episodes so far, and I'm just getting started. So for this episode, I asked people to call in and leave me a voicemail or write me a text or an email about episodes that have been particularly helpful and impactful to them. So I want to thank all of you who did that. That meant so much to me for you to take the time to do that. I'm going to be sharing just a few that I received, but I really appreciate all of them because it means so much to hear how much it has been impactful for you. So let's listen in to some of these calls.
Hi, Amanda. At the beginning of 2023, after 22 years of marriage, although we still deeply love one another, our emotional and physical intimacy was suffering due to mental health challenges and the many distractions of life. Finding and listening to your podcast is one of the many tools that we've used to turn that around. Now, at the end of 2023, our intimacy is so much better on all levels. In fact, it's the strongest it's ever been. We feel closer and more connected than we have in the prior 22 years. And now my wife has signed up to attend your Embrace You retreat this coming February and is so excited. Thank you for the work you're doing. You're changing lives and healing hearts.
Oh, thank you so much. It really warms my heart to hear things that have changed just from listening. It really shows the power in having more education and being able to change your mindset around things, which is what I'm really aiming to do with this podcast, is give you education because that's so, so important. And then offering you new ideas and new thoughts that you can adopt that can change your mindset. All right, let's move to call number 2.
Hi, Amanda. Just wanted to call in and leave you a message. Congratulations on making it to episode 300. And thank you so much for your podcast. There have been several that have been really helpful But I'll just mention the latest one that I listened to, 298. So thank you so much, and please keep up the good work. Bye.
Thank you so much for your call. And thank you for mentioning episode 298, which was my recent episode on how to have anal sex safely. This one was mentioned in quite a few calls, actually. I'm sure it was on the mind of many since it was just aired in the last couple of weeks. And especially since it's not something that we talk about very often. So oftentimes it's a very new concept for couples. The feedback that I got on Instagram about this episode was very mixed. Some people were like, ew, and gross, and vomit emojis. And other people were like, thank you so much. I've been wanting to try this, or I was curious about this. And, I don't think vomit emojis are ever helpful, but I understand that it's not for everyone, but I want to make sure that for those who are interested in it, they know how to do it safely. So I'm glad that it was helpful for you. It's kind of funny. Every once in a while, I air some episodes that are a little bit more controversial. I think anal sex maybe is one of those. And my Instagram takes like a huge hit whenever I do that. Like I lost almost 100 followers from this episode, which is, a big deal. But at the same time, I'm like, well, they're not my people. If they can't be open-minded, even if it's not for them, then that's okay. So, all right, let's move on to call number 3.
Your podcast has inspired me to look beyond the natural ways I do things, to look at things from a different perspective, and to kind of push boundaries, but in a healthy way, while still staying collaborative with my spouse.
Okay, thank you so much for that message. I love that you are trying to move beyond the things that you've been taught in the past, but realizing that it's so important to be collaborative with your spouse in the ways that you move forward. A lot of times I get on consultations or get an email from someone that feels like their eyes have been opened and they want to move forward in a new direction, but their spouse isn't on board. And there oftentimes becomes this air of, well, I know better than you, which doesn't help the situation. In fact, I've actually had quite a few consultations with very reluctant wives, usually, who didn't want to be there, didn't want to talk to me because they'd heard my name so much from their spouse. Well, Amanda Louder says this, and Amanda Louder says that, which really doesn't help your situation or your cause. Collaboration is about moving forward in a way that honors both people's wants and desires. Just because you listen to my podcast and maybe have more information doesn't mean your spouse is ready to hear it or to change, and it doesn't make you better than them. Okay? It's okay if they don't want to change. They don't need to. This is why I always say that you need to focus on what you can control, which is only yourself. So quit worrying about what your spouse is or isn't doing and focus on being your best self. And your best self isn't trying to convince or control your spouse into agreeing with you or me for that matter. All right, let's move on to call number 4.
Hi, this is Heather from New Mexico. I wanted to just thank Amanda for everything I've learned over the last couple of years, but specifically state that my journey really was most impacted by the beginning, or I guess why I got into this was because of episode 171, an interview with Dr. Jennifer Finlayson Fife. I think it was called Equality in Marriage. And I had listened to a few episodes prior to that before getting into any coaching and before really discovering if Amanda's content was what I needed. But once I listened to that, I couldn't just listen to the whole thing all the way through. I had to keep stopping and thinking and pondering on the different points being brought up in the interview because it was so powerful and impactful for me. I listened to that episode probably 6 times in a row before I could move on to any other content. And it changed my life because it changed my perspective on intimacy and marriage and how I could better improve my relationship with my spouse, which I was desperately needing. Not that we had any major problems, but internally, I mean, we had been through a lot of problems, but I just needed that message. And that kicked off what has been an incredibly tough, also incredibly amazing journey of self-discovery and of helping me improve my marriage. And I'm so, so grateful that I've been on board with this for the last, I guess, 2.5 years now. So thank you to Amanda for all of the content for not only the podcast episodes, but also in the membership, being able to be in on coaching calls and listen to the recordings of other people's calls, because it really is in listening to other people's stories that I've gained so much knowledge, information, and growth, because I see how all these principles apply in different situations and scenarios. So that's been my experience, and I'm extremely grateful.
I love Heather so much. Thank you, Heather, for calling in. Heather's been with me in coaching for a couple of years now, and she and her husband have come to one of my couples retreats, and she's coming to the Embrace You retreat. And I'm so excited to have her because I just really love these women who are willing to open their mind and put forth some effort and make changes. Coming into my coaching program and really learning how to apply the things that I'm teaching. And, she and her husband have made so much progress in the last couple of years. I love hearing it, but there's always things that they run into that she wants my help with, and, really sees the value in coaching, which I love. I love the episode that she mentioned, episode 171 on equality in marriage with Dr. Finlayson Fife. I'm so glad it was helpful for her. I love that she mentioned coaching and the membership as well. So many times we listen to podcasts and we learn the material, but it is through coaching that we actually learn how to apply the material in ways that are true and authentic to each of us. And it helps us move forward and make changes faster. A lot of times we need that outside perspective, and we need to see what we're not seeing in ourselves. So thank you, Heather. All right, let's move on to call number 5.
Hi, Amanda. So a podcast episode that was pretty impactful for me was the episode called Sexual Responsibility for Those with Responsive Desire. And in that podcast, you mentioned that sometimes we feel guilt over something we see, watch, listen to, often because it's supposedly wrong, or maybe it involves a person who is not your spouse, even though it helps get you going and creates that desire and brings you closer to your partner and, creates a positive result in your marriage. And you mentioned to ask yourself, is it something that is actually out of your value system, even if it brings the two of you closer, or are you just feeling guilt because that's what you think you should be feeling? And I personally feel that ever since I've really reflected on that and applied this concept in my own marriage, things have improved in my sex life. So I really appreciate that, Amanda, and I thank you for that perspective that I don't think others boldly say, especially in the faith space. So thank you for that, and congratulations on episode 300.
All right. Thank you so much for that message. The episode that she is referring to is another recent episode 296. Guilt is something that I've talked about a few times here on the podcast. In episode 273 on sexual conditioning guilt, I talked about this same topic, but in more detail. So if that was of interest to you, then I would definitely go back and listen to that episode as well. All right, let's go to call number 6.
Hey, Amanda, this is Paula from Norman, Oklahoma, and I was trying to leave you a message explaining that I really enjoy your podcast. I was going to throw out 3 podcast numbers that I feel like really helped me and my spouse of almost 35 years. It would be number 248, number 257, and number 299. We listened to that this weekend, and we'll go back and re-listen to it so that we can make sure we take notes and are using the opportunities that you provide on your podcast to our utmost. So thank you so much for magnifying your skills and letting us all try to be our better selves. Have a great day.
Thank you so much for that message, Paula. The episodes she is mentioning here are episode number 248, Is Public Nudity Okay? Which was actually removed because I got so much backlash from it. It's the only episode I've ever removed. But there were a lot of people who were really interested in it. And if it's an episode that you really want to listen to and you didn't get a chance, feel free to email me and I can send you a private link. But there were so many people that were not very nice about it. And so I removed it. But I have heard that it is from others that it was also really helpful. And I'm glad it was helpful for you and your spouse, Paula. Other ones she mentioned were number 257, How Style Helps Your Confidence in the Bedroom, an interview with Sherry Brazier. That was a fun one. And episode 299, Focus on the Journey, Not the Destination, which I love. All right, let's listen to our last call, call number 7.
Hi, I just wanted to just in response to your Instagram story, I just wanted to say that I listened to one of your podcasts about anal, and then my husband and I were able to try it, and we've done it. After I listened to it, we probably did it like 20 times over the span of like maybe 3 or 4 or 5 months, and we haven't done it as much anymore. I need to go back and listen to it again because I want to do it again. But basically, your podcast helped so much. It taught me about like relaxing and how it can actually feel good. And so whenever we tried it, I took a lot of deep breaths, and that was huge. Like there were points where like it didn't even hurt, and then like even took it a step further and was like trying to teach my friends what I learned from your podcast so that they could try it. And it was just so amazing because I think there's a lot of stigma when you're a Christian woman about trying things like that. And your podcast showed me that like it can be amazing for everyone if that's something you want to try. And I just am so thankful. I've learned so much from you, and it has made my sex life so amazing. So thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Bye-bye.
I love hearing that. Thank you so much for your call. I'm guessing she's referring to my first episode on anal sex, which is number 112. So if you haven't listened to that episode, make sure you go back in the archives and give it a listen. I got a really great call from someone in the UK, but unfortunately the quality of the call wasn't great. So I'm going to do my best to interpret her message and read it to you because it really was so lovely. She said, "Hi, Amanda. Your podcast has been life-changing for me, and I'm so grateful for the opportunity to tell your listeners about all of my favorite episodes, especially the ones that clear up misconceptions in church culture. I did everything right, standards, callings, studying my scriptures, etc., and I fully repressed my sexuality because I thought it was dirty and wrong. From your podcast, I've been able to learn all the things I wish I'd learned before I got married. When I got married, I had never seen male nudity, sex was physically painful, and I had too much shame to get help. I struggled horribly for 8 years, and there was a lot of duty sex. When I found your podcast, Amanda, it was like a light bulb moment. I felt instantly that the way that you relate to sexuality was the way I wanted to relate to my sexuality. I binged all of your episodes and I saved all of my favorite moments from your transcripts. The episodes have changed my mindset, and I can now have open communication between me and my husband. So my favorites are episode 78 on guilt, shame, and eroticism. You shared a quote by Jennifer Finlayson Fife that said, "We believe the body is necessary for our spiritual progression and development. So sexuality, by extension, is not an impediment to our spirituality, but a fundamental part of it." Anything you've said about overcoming sexual dysfunction has also been incredibly helpful because that was been some of my biggest problems. Episode 121, Increasing Your Libido, you gave a link to a sexy playlist that I listened to, and it helped turn me on and help me stay in a helpful mindset. Episode 134, Masturbation in the Church. This one was super helpful. I feel more prepared to talk to my children about this topic. Episode 150, The Maltz Hierarchy of Sexual Interaction. You talked about different levels of sexual interaction and about fulfillment from making love and authentic sexual intimacy. I also love listening to episode 159, 4 Keys to a Healthy, Passionate Marriage. Another episode that is fantastic for talking to kids about sex is episode 216, Come Follow Me, Why is Chastity Important to God's Plan? I was able to use this to teach it in my ward. Episode 237, Modesty and for the Strength of Youth. This topic was just wonderful. I'd like to thank you again for what you do, and I look forward to the podcast every week. Thank you so much for that message. I hope I interpreted it right. You touched on so many good episodes. I think the Masturbation in the Church, episode 134, is my most downloaded podcast by far. I've of course gotten a little bit of backlash on that one, but most of the feedback on that one has been really, really helpful for people. They say that it was life-changing for them to realize that they didn't have to have so much shame about masturbation and that it could be a really good thing for themselves and for their marriage. One thing that you also touched on that I really think is important is that you can go to my website, amandalauder.com, and click on podcasts and find a podcast episode. So the link to any podcast episode is just amandalauder.com/podcast/ the number of the episode. And on there, I have transcripts for every single episode. So if you don't like to listen and you would rather read, then it's there. If you want a specific quote or something, they are there. All of my sources for what I use to create these podcasts, the research that I've done, the links are all there. So it can be a really good resource for you for a lot of things. So thank you for touching on that. So in addition to voicemails, I also got a few messages that I wanted to read. The first is from Steve Riggs. He said, I love your podcast. I don't imagine you have a lot of men say that to you, but I appreciate your authenticity, your boldness, and your consistency in what you share and teach about sex and intimacy. It has opened up my heart and mind to more than I ever could have imagined. My marriage is better, my sex life is better, but most of all, my relationship to myself and my sexuality is better than it ever has been in my life. I lived for years in crippling guilt and shame cycle, and your podcast opened the door to freedom. I am by no means perfect, and at times I still find myself dealing with old patterns of thinking, but I am far and wide better and happier than I used to be. And thank you so much for sharing that, Steve. I actually get a lot of men who listen and find it helpful in understanding themselves as well as their wife and their relationship better. I think maybe more men than women. I don't know. But as you can see from the messages that were shared, quite a few, probably at least half were men. So thank you so much. The last one that I want to read is from Elaine. She said, the podcast that changed my life and my relationship with my husband was Jeff and Joy. Their story brought one last thread of hope for the relationship dynamic my husband and I were in. I contacted Amanda and determined to give her coaching a chance to make a difference, and it totally did. Working with her changed everything. I knew I wanted a differentiated relationship, and she taught me how to create that. Our relationship is better than it ever was before I listened to Jeff and Joy's story. Thank you so much, Elaine. I love you. Elaine has been with me for a few years as well. She did one-on-one coaching and then has been in my membership since it began. The episode she's referring to is episode 103, which is an episode I did with one of my clients and her husbands, and how coaching with me completely changed their relationship. And Joy is one of my good friends. She and I went to high school together, and so I've stayed in contact with her since she quit coaching with me, and, they're still doing great. So that's really fun to hear. It's been really amazing to hear from all of you. Thank you so much for everyone who called in and wrote messages, those that I aired and those that I didn't. I truly appreciate all of them. If you didn't get a chance to write in before, I would love to hear from you. I would also, the best way to show me your gratitude and appreciation is to leave me a review in your podcast app. That way more people can find it. If you're not on Apple, There's, a few podcasts apps, Spotify, I think you can leave messages or leave reviews, but Apple is usually the best. That's the majority of where people listen. So thank you so much. Thank you for listening to this episode and all of the other episodes. Here's to even more episodes to help you strengthen your relationship with yourself, your spouse, and your sexuality. Remember, love is a journey, not a destination. Stay committed, stay passionate, and stay connected. Goodbye for now. If you want to learn how to apply what I teach you on this podcast, I want to invite you to work with me in my Embrace You coaching programs. In my coaching programs, I teach you all of the skills and tools you need to have a better relationship with yourself, your spouse, and your sexuality. You also get weekly coaching to help you apply what you are learning in your own relationship. For more information, go to amandalauder.com and click Get Help in the menu to see my programs for both men and women. Like what you're hearing on this podcast? Make sure you hit subscribe so you don't miss a single episode. Don't forget to leave me a review and share it with your friends.